Welcome to your show. Welcome to your program. Welcome to SOUQ Pulse. This is SOUQ News, where we are all about positive programming. So I will always start on that belt. No matter where you've been, no matter what has hit you, no matter the network where you are glued on and you're trying to ask yourself, what is this? Come to SOUQ News and Detox. We are all about positive programming. We seek solutions, and in those solutions is the profit. That is where the business is. Here on SOUQ Pulse, we look at issues and we talk. We tell you directly, don't keep quiet. So it doesn't matter who is gaining, who is losing. We talk. It doesn't matter the nation whose policies, be theirs or those that they've gone into debt with, is killing them or making them get profits or making the businesses flow or making the businesses slumber. We still talk. Be it health, be it technology, be it innovation, we talk, and same should you. Welcome to your show. Today we are going to do something that we will do more regular and on weekly basis because we need to get productive. That's the baseline. My name is Chuks John-Rogers. I'm going to introduce our topic and also introduce our guest. We have him again. He's back and he's in Lagos. And hey, we've missed him. I sure know you also have done that. So hey, I'll introduce our topic and our guest once we come back from the break. Then remember, don't go anywhere. So pause, we'll be right back. Welcome back. It's still SOUQ Pulse. For those that have always looked around, for those that are observant, which I know you are, one thing is sure, you get to see a signature everywhere. China. Now, if you look around Africa, you also see this signature everywhere. China. China is expanding. China is not just expanding, but investing majorly in Africa. Then you ask yourself, how? Why? Because they see something good. That's what we'll be going to today, and that's what we'll be talking about today. We are looking at the expansion of China and their influence in Africa, and we are asking ourselves directly this question. For today, what are the opportunities there for Africa? They said if you want to get somewhere, follow who know road. That's the Nigerian parlance, let me get to tell you. Now, if we are looking at a nation that has been able to bring themselves out of a situation, that's what we're talking about, that's what we're calling it. And over time, they have become a superpower, China. And now they are forming and getting this investment and direct relationship with Africa to this magnitude. What are the opportunities for Africa? Remember, it's the opportunities we are dwelling on today because we also want to get productive. Now, for those wondering, major infrastructures in Africa, China, major investment in Africa, China, major markets, China, a lot of treaties, we're not asking how it's going, China. So what are the opportunities right here for Africa? In 2023 alone, the trade between Africa and China rose by 282.1 billion. I know you say that's not that much, yes, but ask yourself, what was it like 10 years ago, 20 years ago? That's what we are going to. And to do justice to this particular topic for today, this discussion for today is no other but our very own learned person. I always call him that. He's a public analyst, and he's one that has come back from getting people educated. Now he's going to get us educated. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please join me as I welcome again on SOUQ Pulse, Dr. Idahosa. Sir, you're welcome back.
Jukes, pleasure to be on the show this evening. Great Nigeria.
Yeah, great SOUQ.
Great SOUQ.
Thank you very much. Now, welcome back. Now, let's go straight and dive in. Opportunities for Africa. What are the opportunities when it comes to China and their expansion in Africa? Let's go straight to the beginning. Now, for negotiations, Africa has always had these negotiations with former colonial masters, former colonial lords, people that colonized or people that were close to those that colonized Africa. And we had treaties that were always there. And for most negotiations, you look at those treaties, and Africa was negotiating from a disadvantage. Is it possible that this relationship with China will give Africa a new start when it comes to negotiations?
Well, I don't think so necessarily. If we continue on this trajectory we are on, except that there's a deliberate policy on the part of the Africans to get to the point of self-realization that they want to grow up.
Point of self-realization.
Realization that there's a need to grow up.
Okay.
Because naturally, when you look at the relation between China and the Africans, and you see there's a thread that is around that relationship. Chinese understand Africa as being very desperate and a lot of bureaucracy very corrupt. And they take advantage of these weaknesses to penetrate us. But because they are deliberate in their coming to Africa, they are able to actually make arrangements such that Africans surrender their sovereignty to them in most of all these contracts.
Okay. Now, when you say make arrangements where Africa surrender their sovereignty to them, was it not more of a negotiation or a contract that people entered into?
You see, just on
those letters were on the paper you signed.
Just on Wednesday, I was speaking to some bureaucrats and I was telling them the story of Esau and Jacob in the scripture.
Is it Esau we know?
Yeah, the same Esau you know, who was hungry for one day and was ready to trade his pride, his birthright, on the pretext that if he doesn't eat this meal now, he will die. I have never seen where somebody died for not eating in one day. But at least I say at least you can survive up to 7 days. Esau was just hungry for one day. And therefore he says to his brother, what does this right mean to me? If I don't eat this food, I will die. So you can take it. So I said to them, most of the agreements we sign with international bodies, we don't do it from the point of strength. We do it from the point of weakness. So we are beggarly.
Are we looking at those that are doing the signing or a general behavior?
It's a general behavior really right now, because when you see governments across, whether it's in Kenya, whether it's in Angola, whether it's in Zimbabwe, whether it's in Nigeria, you see the same trend happening.
Okay, which means
where we sign out our sovereignty.
Just to get
at
that particular point in time.
Yeah, just to make people feel good that we are making some progress even when we are on the same spot, not moving.
Okay. So now let's ask this question again. Are we doing anything different from the kind of negotiations and agreements we're entering into with the past colonial masters?
Well, these are all the issues. They said if you want to hide something from a black man, write it in a book. Because he will not read it.
But black men write books too.
They don't read the books.
The one they wrote.
So this is a problem. So if you want to
Why are we sending people that don't read books to sign contracts and sign negotiations on behalf of us?
This is the issue. So when you can do a random search, even within your office, and as everybody who has bought a piece of equipment, how many of them take pain to read the manual?
Which of the manual are you talking about?
Because it's a form of an agreement that is signed between yourself and the manufacturer of your product. So you don't know where the indemnity lies. Because all you are interested in is just a piece of the device. This is a problem and it's fundamental to Africa.
Is it the piece of the device or the on, start, work? Or is it reading the manual? Okay.
So that's the thing. You just buy a phone and then the phone is there. The manual is, you cannot even bring out the manual from the pack. They just start to operate. So this is a problem.
The manual is kept. Should you want to sell the phone again, you have a new looking manual to package and sell.
The phone. So this is a problem. So when you don't read agreements, you are not looking in between the line to look at the terms that is inserted in those things, because the man who is coming to you is deliberate. He understands what he wants from you. He knows that you are fraudulent.
Okay. Now, before we get to that particular part, which I will shy away from getting too deeply, let's look at it. Is China and the negotiations, are there really opportunities for Africa in them?
There should be opportunity if we as Africans become very deliberate.
If we as Africans become deliberate.
Very deliberate. Okay. Because once you're getting into partnership, which is, somebody told me a story which made me really laugh about, I think it was on Thursday or Wednesday in the course of our training. And he said there was this particular country that signed contract with a particular government in Nigeria. And when they want to come to start to work, they come from 3 p.m. when the local staff had closed, they're almost closing. So they walk through the night. So he said one person accosted the head of the team and said, why are people always coming in the night? Is it I don't want these people to? So he said that, look, the agreement that was signed was that is install, don't show.
That's serious.
Yes. So all the agreement we agreed was that just install, but don't show. They didn't say we should show. So which means we can actually look at this conversation with people and say, okay, we're not just wanting you to install, we also want you to show.
Okay, we are going to get to that install, don't show. Definitely going to get there. Now we are having a bit of, it's not just a bit, it's harsh and it's direct, unlike the diplomacy we used to see it before. Now we are having countries break into harsh corners. BRICS, to be specific. Now we have that alignment, and we have China playing a major role. We have other Asian countries playing a major role. Now with what China is doing in Africa, do you think aligning with China, Africa aligning in China, is positive for Africa?
It should be positive. But at the moment, that is the point I'm making. At the moment, it is not positive. It can be positive. It could be positive if we, as Africans, are getting into this business and we're sure that, look, this is what we want. And so you know what you want, you become responsible. So once we become responsible as a people, and then we're going to sign a contract with you, we know that it is for us not a death or life issue. We are not in the situation of Esau. So we're not willing to sign out our birthright. Because it's not only in Africa that China are doing business. Now, if China do business in Europe and they don't get into this trap, and they do business in America, they don't get into this trap, they do business in some other part of Asia, they don't get into this trap. Why is it it's only in Africa we get into that trap? So it shows you that there's something that's fundamentally wrong about our political class and our elite who get these people in because they don't have intention, really, aboriginal, to really see that this thing benefits the greater majority of the people, but the private interest of the person who is doing the lead is always taking precedence over the national interest.
Private interest over national interest. And the other party who happen to be intentional about it.
They are very intentional because they are protecting their national interests.
Take advantage.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Now, let's also look at it from this other perspective. We have Chinese policies. First, let's look at the go-out policy. Then we'll now look at technology growth and acquisition, then self-sufficiency. Go-out policy has been there right from the 70s, 80s, majorly in the 90s. They are shipping out Chinese companies away from China with Chinese money going out and establishing and also making China self-sufficient.
Yeah.
What can Africa replicate from this sort of policies? From the go-out policy to the technology acquisition and self-sufficiency?
Yeah, but if you go from the ancient China to the modern China, you see there's a transition from where they are. China did not beg anybody to dash them technology. They did a whole lot of reverse engineering by stealing technology from anywhere they can find it.
Can you say that last part?
Yeah, but that's what I've just said.
Well, I didn't hear it very well. Can you?
You don't need to hear it very well. What I'm saying is that China did not set out to go and beg anybody, dash us technology.
Okay.
They went out to steal technology.
Okay.
Because there's nobody who is going to dash you technology, as it were. So you must be deliberate in terms of what you want to get from a people. So they take a piece of equipment, they do a reverse technology, check it, what is it made, then of course they try their own prototype. And that's how they have been developing. And now they have built competencies that they are even doing better than the original owners of the technology. So this is the part every nation that is serious should toe in terms of what they want to do. And this takes some year and it takes some effort. But you see, the bigger problem is in Africa, and I think this is where a lot of people are also talking about our government system, that liberal democracy and this tenured civil rule will really not help Africa. Because you find that there's always a race to win the next election. And therefore,
and not the race to deliver?
Yeah, of course. That's why they talk about it, that older statesmen talks about the next generation. Politicians talk about the next elections. So we are almost concerned about next elections. So what do? We run into agreements that are not working just to prove a point and say, okay, we have concessioned this to a Chinese company, we have concessioned this to a Chinese company, and we use it as if it's an achievement. So this is a problem. So there's no strategy around our engagement diplomatically. And this has been the bane of Nigerian diplomacy, for example. Because if you look at it, even though where we've said as a country, right from the origin, that we have these three concentric circles, that West Africa, Africa, and then the globe. But we are seeing that all the efforts that Nigerians, for example, have made in terms of investing its resource in Africa, in West Africa, is always not compensated. Because nobody acknowledges it. And that's why people sit today and say, look at what South Africa does to us, and see what Nigeria committed into that. Because there was no strategy around these moves. Because you're just doing things and you're not looking at what are the implications, what are the agreements that should come from this. So we threw money around and we are not really expecting anything back in return. So when people give you money, sometimes they are expecting loyalty from you.
And it's spelled out.
And it's spelled out clearly.
Okay. Now, let's go back to the technology part we were talking about. Now we have, thanks to the Go Out policy, we have Chinese companies scattered all around Africa. Very good, big companies. What is stopping African companies, smaller companies, and African institutes from emulating what is being done in those particular companies that are on their soil right now? Why can't they start imitating those technology being used in those companies or replicating those products?
Yeah, but even this imagination really, that even to the point of rubber slippers making factories, all dominated by the Chinese. And these are not sophisticated technology.
African soil.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Recycling technology, dominated by them.
On African
soil. And these are things that we can actually leverage as a people. So the problem in here is the fact that we're living in an environment and we cannot even see the potentials that are inherent in them.
Why? Are these opportunities China have come with? If there are opportunities, why are we not seeing it?
You see, I told our group on Wednesday, Miles Monroe wrote a book before he died, which he, of course, recommended to most African leaders to read, which is The Burden of Freedom. And according to Miles Monroe in that book, there are two very critical, fundamental criteria that a nation that is serious must put into her. Number one is taking responsibility, and number two is accountability. And he said in most of the third world countries, these two elements are missing. We are not responsible. So there's a slave mentality that somebody must make provision for you, somebody must supply what you need, somebody must give you an assistance, and so we cannot take responsibility for our lives. And that's why you are seeing that all African leaders, when you elect them, the first thing they do is junket the whole world around, looking for help. That's slave mentality. We are not even thinking of seeing how to look at within and see things around us and see how we maximize the opportunities and the privileges which nature has given to us. And the first thing that we are looking for is seeking for help. And you can still see people sit around and say, oh, there's no problem in taking loan or debt. It's not a big problem. How you use it is what matters. It does matter. Because we're not even. While other nations are implementing the law of effectuation, making use of the resources that they find within their environment, we are there, cap in hand, begging for help everywhere across the globe. And of course, because you are hungry, and of course, like Esau, if you don't eat the red porridge, You die so you can mortgage your future.
Okay. This particular red porridge has gotten a lot of passion in this particular millennium. Now let's go to the loans where you went to. I'm happy you went there first. Let's also look at China. A lot of Chinese loans are tied to infrastructure. And a lot of those infrastructure is built by China. Is it better that way compared to the loans African nations used to take before, where they take loans from Bretton Woods organizations and they can't show what the loans were used for?
Yeah,
Does Africa have any better?
Yeah, but it still gets to the point of negotiation. So you get into an agreement and say, oh, we want a PPP arrangement. And there's a law that exists in this country for PPP arrangement. And this PPP arrangement is between us and you. And say, okay, you're going to do this road for us. And say, okay, well, we are giving you loan to do this road. And then they tell you, okay, well, we are going to bring the expertise. We are going to supply the equipment. And all these things are tied into the agreement. And so you don't have a bargaining power. That's the problem. So you are not able to say, oh, well, I leave this loan, but I have alternative. But where people have alternative, they can negotiate and say, we don't want this. I've made this reference to the U.S. Buying 5G from China against the U.S. And, of course, they have to trade in something. And that is the willingness of the United States to sell war aircraft to the UAE. And they say, we don't need this. We are not fighting any war. So what's important to us is the 5G, because that would drive tourism. So what is in focus is their vision, where they are headed for. So all that they think that they're going to do, all the operational, all the tactics, all the strategy are driving one direction, and that's the end goal. Now, we don't have an end goal. So everybody wake up and does just whatever thing that they see, like they say in the book of Judges. And in those days, there were no kings, and people do the things that they feel that was right for them.
But for these days, African nations have presidents. They have leaders. Be them the real leaders or be them the not real leaders. But now let's look at it from this aspect. The last Nations Cup, China came in and built stadia. We saw the infrastructure built and completed and handed over. We've seen China build rail across Africa. At least we can look and say, okay, that is the rail built by CCECC. Now, this is the money that was used. Okay, good. Now we are owing this money because this infrastructure was built. Unlike what we used to see where maybe a Ghana will go and collect loan to build a dam we will never see. Same thing with some other East African countries. Is this a better approach to the loans? Or is this another Africa having the same problem? But at least we can see something we can hold on to. Which is better?
Yeah, it's the same point I have made to you. Chinese are loaning to companies in America.
Yes.
And they are not having these kind of issues. They are loaning to companies in Europe. They are not having these kind of issues. Now, why is this issue in Africa? The issue is in Africa is because they also see that there's something about us.
Something about the set they did the negotiation with.
Yeah, about us.
The group.
You see, this is the point. And this is my argument.
Can we start this argument? If you were the person doing that negotiation, will you do the same thing?
Well, I'm not even thinking I will even go for a loan in the first place. And that is
okay.
Because
if you are doing a negotiation, even if it's not for a loan, and it has to do with business venture with China, will you go the same route this set of people that have put Africa at the back have gone?
Yeah, I would not.
Good. So it's not something about us. It's something about a set of people.
Now, the question you have to ask me, will I ever get the opportunity to be a part of those ruling class?
Must you be in the ruling class? Because we're also
but for me to be able to sign on behalf of the government, I have to be in the ruling class.
Okay, now we are getting there. Now, beyond what government does, Chinese companies are also finding inroad into Africa. Chinese businesses, not just government now, are also finding inroads into Africa. And Chinese businesses are dealing with African businesses.
Yeah, but this is what
some of those businesses are doing very good.
It is not the business that comes first.
Okay.
The Chinese government comes first.
Yes, the Chinese government came first.
Take, for example, you're having the challenge that Nigerian and the certain Chinese companies having. Now, when you go to look at the real facts behind this matter, you discover that in 2001, the Chinese government and the Nigerian government signed an agreement on how they have to deal with their companies mutually. So what happened in 2007 and what happened in 2012 and 13 are things that are built on the agreement signed between the Nigerian government and the Chinese government in 2001. So this is the issue. So it is not the company first. It's the government.
I agree.
Yes.
Good.
Who is protecting the interests of their establishment to see that wherever they are on the planet Earth, they are protected. And this is quite very instructive. I give you one experience I had some certain year in the United Arab Emirates. We were on the street, and it was during a Ramadan period. And, you know, you don't eat in the public. And we're traveling a long distance, and we needed to eat in the public. So we asked the driver, who was in the car, can we eat in the public because it's Ramadan period? He said, but you said your friend is an American. We said, yes. He said, oh, that's fine. If police stop us, the American embassy will come and take him off from here. So it tells you.
Okay. So for those that are in that same vehicle and are not Americans.
So of course, we could languish the jail because nobody will. But you see, the point was the fact that if he flags him as an American, the likelihood that, of course, because they know the police knew in the UAE that this guy, if they take him in the police station in the next 20 minutes, that the government of America will be there in UAE to ensure that he's released and nothing happened to him. Because that is what government is meant for, is protecting the interests of the generality of your people. That's what the Chinese government is doing all across the globe. And so they ensure that wherever their company will do business, that the ecosystem is friendly to them. So they give them all the support that is required. So African leaders need to do that. And that had to be intentional. So it's not something that we have to wish. We must get to that point to understand that whatever prosperity that these businesses are bringing, they have a way of rubbing off on even the prosperity and the success of the regime.
Okay, they have a way of rubbing off on the prosperity of whoever is in charge.
Is in charge at that
particular point in time. Now, let's also go back to this particular point you've raised, where you said that every country, in quote, let's leave the US out of this now. China is what we are talking about. They protect not just the companies, but their citizens wherever
they find themselves.
Are this not nuggets that African leaders should also see and start emulating?
Yeah, but that is what it is. That is what we've been talking about. That, you see, you're first a Chinese.
Not me, right?
Not you.
Okay.
Yeah. So the individual is first a Chinese.
Okay, I'm first a Nigerian.
I wish that we'll have millions and tons of people who are first Nigerians, first Ghanaians, first Zimbabweans, before they become themselves. In that case, when they are acting, whether at home or outside, the interests of their nation is elevated over and above their personal interest.
Okay, now
that's what they call nationalism.
Okay, now let's also turn it and go beyond the individual. Let's look at Chinese companies. Every single Chinese company in Africa, I won't say is affiliated, but is directly answerable to the government, and the government take care of them wherever they are.
Yeah.
And the government put them first when there's any form of competition.
Yeah.
Why and what is stopping African nations and African leaders to do the same thing when it comes to African companies outside the shores or having dealings with other companies outside the shores of Africa?
That is what it said. The Holy Book says, where there is no vision, people cast restraint. Effort is wasted. There's a global vision for a prosperous China that is the dominant nation on earth. economically more sophisticated. And so they are working at that. That's the point. So, and this is why today you can find a China who is, of course, neck to neck, even with the biggest economy of the world. And they are pushing a whole lot. Now you see Europe, America, even be threatened. The recent trade diplomacy between this sub-region and a country tells you what this means. That these guys know what they're doing, they're determined to get to a particular destination, and everything they're doing is channeled towards reaching that destination. Professor Claude Ake of blessed memory wrote that the leaders in Africa have never put development issues on the front burners on the table. In his little work he wrote, How Politics Underdeveloped Africa. That all the debate in Africa is about power sharing.
Okay. While we look at the debate going beyond power sharing, this is SOUQ Pulse, mind you. And we're looking at China and their inroads. This has gone beyond inroads because they are here already. And for those that are from the other sides of the planet and other continents, don't worry, China is here and we are dealing with them. What can Africa take out of China here? What opportunities abound? What policies can we learn from? What can we copy? That's what we're talking about today on SOUQ Pulse. We're going on a very short break. Dr. Idahosa is still here. It's not going anywhere. So you two don't go anywhere. We'll soon be back. Welcome back. It's SOUQ Pulse and we are live on SOUQ News. You really need to see and hear what happens when these cameras are not live. It's always good. We're here and we're looking at Asia and we're asking ourselves, as they expand and have great influence in Africa, what are those opportunities and how can African nations, its leaders and its businesses tap into? What are those opportunities in the first place? Let's get to see it. What are we not seeing? I'll have Dr. Idahosa here, and he's been shining and throwing a whole light on the opportunities that not just the ones that are there, but the ones that we have refused to see, and the ones that are there that we are still missing day in, day out. Before we went behind the cameras, we were talking about some good industrial estates that have been abandoned, and all of a sudden, if you go there right now, they are occupied by Chinese companies. Kudos to them.
Yeah.
We ask ourselves, what exactly are we missing? And that takes us to our next question. You talked about the story you heard at the last trading, which happens to be outside Lagos. Let's leave the name of the place. And someone said they come to work by 3 and
Yes.
they signed a no-show agreement. Now we have several infrastructure that China is developing across Africa. A lot of this infrastructure, when they are done developing it, they've done a lot of it. Is Africa and Africans not supposed to take over this infrastructure? At what point is Africa going to see the opportunity of knowing and passing this knowledge from the Chinese developers to Africans?
Yeah, but that's the whole issue that really worries us. And I think this is something also that those who are at the corridor of power must also have to really evaluate critically to see that if you're signing an agreement or a procurement agreement, you should be able to tie into those agreements and to say, yes, there's also part of this that you are going to train our people to maintain this equipment, and you sign it into the deal. If they said, oh, we cannot train, then of course don't go into the agreement. Because these are little things that amounts to the bondage that the African is in terms of debt.
Are they little?
Yes, I said these little things.
But they are not little.
They have accumulated now to become a big storm in a teacup. because we're not doing due diligence and we're not doing the needful. And that's why I keep emphasizing, when agreements are signed, the truth is not that our people really do not see some of those clauses, but like they said, and of course China has worked on that now. When the Great Wall of China was built, in 100 years, twice it was invaded. And the people who came in through the gate by giving money to the soldiers. And they took money and they entered into China, and then twice in 100 years. And this was, of course, a very fundamental problem. So they have worked on that. And now ethics and morality is on the rise. And this is why you find that, of course, capital punishment is sure in China if you do things that, of course, will sabotage the interest of the state. So these are the issue. How do we drive righteousness?
How do we drive
righteousness in Africa such that...
Not just for those that represent us, for everybody?
I think is you see, my worry really, which
Must
is my
we drive
argument.
righteousness? Why can't we just put the capital punishment there? If you commit, you go.
You see, the issue is that, there are a lot of issues. Just last week, after the end bad governance protests, the Inspector General of Police came out in the open that some foreigners were arrested for fueling this crisis.
That's still...
And incidentally, the one who was the real key among them had escaped. How? Okay. We have not heard who is fired. We have not heard whose head has been cut. The same happened with the Binance case. So when you are looking at issues, so it's just beyond those who are in control of power. So that thing seems to be almost in everybody.
It's not in everybody. Remember, we asked the question in the course of the program, and we got a definite answer. So maybe it's not in everybody.
Maybe when I am manning that bit, then I'll be able to answer very correctly. Okay. You see, but the issue is simple, that there are national laws, national regulations that are violated in breach, even by people who are supposed to know. I was asking somebody that day,
okay.
How can we be talking about stealing of crude oil from Nigeria, and ships are moving through the water? We have all manners of security apparatus in the water, and the things are moving, and nobody sees when it moves. These are issues. Now, if you have been doing
these are issues of righteousness.
No, yeah, these are issues of righteousness. Okay. Because if you have been doing one thing, you can count the regimes in Nigeria from 1960 to date, and if the same problem had
the regimes are not righteous.
No. Wait.
Yes, the regimes are not righteous.
We have had military, we have had civilian.
Not righteous.
If these regimes,
okay,
with different actor personnel from different generations and epoch are living the same way. You see, the law of probability says that it is likely that everybody...
Now, I like when you say the law of probability.
Yes.
It's a probability.
Yes, I do.
It's a law of probability.
Yeah.
Which means there is still a percentage that could be false.
So I just feel that, like that same question that Abraham was going to ask to God, if we find 10 people in Sodom and Gomorrah, will you still destroy it? And God says, if I find 10 people, I will not. But eventually Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed because there were no 10 people righteous in it.
But there were 3.
How are we sure the 3 were righteous?
But they still escaped. There were 3 and they escaped. Now let's leave this analogy. I'll stay here. Let's look at ports. This is one particular area China has dominated in Africa. Construction of ports. Not just financing, but direct construction of ports. Another area is shipping. Chinese shipping lines rule African waters till tomorrow, whether manned by them or not manned by them. Now we see this port, be it the one they will hand over or not hand over, whatever agreement was entered into it. We see these shipping lines coming in on daily basis into Africa. These opportunities not seen. Is Africa not seeing opportunities in being able to operate not just the port, but being able to also replicate what China has done in the last 15, 20 years with these constructions?
You see, you gave us a figure, but unfortunately, the details, which they say that the devil's in the details, you didn't show us. That
We're looking at opportunities.
yes, of course, we're looking at
So
opportunities.
later we'll now look at the devil in those
in
opportunities.
those details.
Yes.
So, but what I'm saying is that you could just look at the trade relations between Nigeria and China, for example, or Africa and China. It has increased. Now, is it a two-way trade? Now, how?
Definitely, it can't be a two-way trade.
How balanced is the trade? What's the level of skewness?
Somebody is older than the next person. Somebody is more productive than the next person. So it can't be. Somebody is bringing the money and the other person is collecting. At least you taught us that in one of the trainings. So it can't be a balanced trade. But now in this trade, no matter how unbalanced it is, these opportunities, are we taking advantage of them?
Yeah, but that is the point. Because the opportunity is one-sided. Because one man's meat is another man's poison.
These same opportunities is open, and we see it happen in the UAE. We see it happen in other Arabian countries. People bring in their money to do business, but not to detriment of the Arabian countries.
Yeah, but because there is discipline in place, or people who understand what their national focus is. I mentioned this recently, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Some Bangladesh were arrested in the UAE and tried and jailed for protesting against their government in UAE. And they said it is unlawful for street protestation in UAE. They were not protesting against UAE. They were protesting against their home government. For being in the street alone, they were arrested and they were tried and they were jailed. So this tells you how nations protect their interests. Nations that are serious. We virtually worship these people.
Okay. Let's leave that side. But if you have been falling our hands, it's still in Nigerian parlance. Just know that you've been marked. Yeah. Now, let's look at special economic zones. China is doing this a whole lot. Now, they come to Africa, they pick up their specific interest. They go and develop that particular zone. Then the next thing you get to see is companies from China get into those zones and start production. But at the same time, African companies are there, Africans are there. Maybe you get to work in those places. Are we not also seeing these opportunities? Don't you see this as opportunities?
You see, it's just that China is doing colonization by other means.
Colonization by other means?
Yes.
Okay.
Different from what the West had done. West came in here and colonized us, set up a government over us, and then, of course, exploited our resources. And in some of the cases, our able-bodied men were taken to go develop their environment. And that, of course, was blatant, and people see a whole lot of immorality in it. So, but you see that what really precipitated the colonization or this acquisition of territory was the social pressure that was in these colonies. Now, these colonial masters' abode. So there was social tension. Industrialization had gotten to almost its peak, and of course, industry could no longer accommodate so many people that were being born, and there was a need to ship away some people from the environment to go to other place and become masters, since they could not become master at home. So that's exactly what China is also doing with trade arrangements across the globe. They're also shipping social tension away from China and creating avenue or Chinese extension.
Chinese extension.
For their citizens.
As beautiful as the Chinese extension, what opportunities are bound for Africa in those Chinese extensions?
It's left to be faking. See, you can imagine, for example, you with your suit, you want to take your wife out for a treat. Where do you go to in Nigeria?
Well, it depends if she can cook.
You go to a Chinese restaurant. And you are proud about it.
When there is Iya Basira very close.
You see, this is what it is.
When there is Iya Basira very close.
You want to have a treat, you go to a Chinese restaurant.
Because they have been able to brand themselves that much.
So this is, of course, and this is patriotism.
For China. Okay, now let's also now look at money. The Exim Bank of China. They are not just in China. They are almost everywhere right now. And Chinese businesses and African businesses have opportunities of being able to deal with the bank directly. Why do we still have a whole lot of government directly go for Bretton Woods loans when they can get it easier with some banks in China?
You see, of course, a lot of the Global West had argued that most of the facilities that you get from China, they are debt trapionage in terms that...
Their argument.
Yes, that's it, of course.
But do they tell us the ones we get from them?
Yeah, but you see, they're really not interested in your colony anymore, really. But you see, these guys are interested. And that is why they're actually negotiating your sovereignty. They are negotiating your sovereignty. Otherwise, how will you be claiming a national asset of a country by an individual company, which is business to government? It does not exist.
The question should also be, when that particular agreement was being signed, what was signed?
Yeah, that's the thing.
What was signed?
We're not there, so we don't know what was signed. So these are the real issues.
We have a governor that has come to apologize to his people. Unfortunately, it's our presidential jet that is in question. But let's leave that matter till next week.
Not your evil money.
Whose money exactly?
Our money.
I hope mine is not involved.
The P&ID award that is in UK is as threatened as the Attorney General of Nigeria has said, that they also want to take that money. And they are looking at Nigerian asset in Belgium. They are looking at Nigerian asset in America. This case is filed in 8 different countries across the globe, including Singapore.
But this is those kind of issues where this can be sorted out with good diplomacy, without all this issue and all this rancor coming out.
Yeah, but it is also the rascality of the political class in Nigeria, who feel sometimes that you can do and undo and no heaven will fall. This is the outcome. And these are the sort of things that you get when people are getting into action without considering the consequences of such action. So you just don't wake up and say you want to fire somebody. You have to also look at what are the legal implications of firing this person. So you just feel that you have executive power, then you become reckless with the power, and just feel that you can do anything and go away with it as long as you are the chief executive. But these are some of the things that should teach us lessons, that we need to exercise power and authority with some sense of restraint.
Exercise power with sense of restraint. Now, let's get to this particular last bit before we close the program for today. Now, Africa is also having issues when it comes to security. When Africa or African countries decide to buy some form of weapon, they have to go get clearance from one UN or wait for one elder brother country to approve or not approve, even with your money. China is not in that particular league. Do you see opportunity with Africa getting the form or types of weapon they need with China because they are open? Is this something you advise us? Okay, good. It's an opportunity. Let's explore.
Well, of course, since the Chinese had been admitted into the WTO from 2001, a lot has changed with those that, of course, if you're a signatory to some certain treaty, there are a lot of trade that you cannot deal on. And those treaties are signed and they are binding from the West.
Yes, they are signed and binding, but sometimes, most times, they don't obey them.
You see, the rule in international relations says that some nations are so immature that you cannot leave the trigger of a dangerous weapon in their hands.
Signed by
the United Nations.
Okay.
So
headed by.
So this is the rule. So okay. And that's why, of course, if you look at all the argument around the nuclear negotiation, that there are only some privileged nations that are feel to be matured who are able to, with sense of restraint, use whatever capacity that they have developed. And so they don't want this thing to filter into their hands
But as we speak right now, Africa is not even asking or going anywhere close to that kind of weapons of mass destruction. Africa is just looking for long-range weapons. Africa is looking for aircraft, and Africa is looking for tanks.
Yeah.
As it is right now.
Of course.
Even with that,
because they are not
still,
even sure.
there's still a whole lot of restriction.
They are not sure of your responsible use of the rifle because
African
they feel that
government,
if they are given to you,
okay,
you are going to use it to kill your opponent,
okay,
or to kill your people. So they feel that you are not responsible enough.
The amount of death in Africa, is it the proportion? Is it as much as the amount of those killed in gun violence in the West? Well, even with the war.
Yeah, because you understand this thing. And this is...
I don't know if I'm making sense.
Now, if you see the narrative right now in the West...
Whose narrative?
Their own narrative. Okay. From their media narrative. What you see really here, and they feel that most of all these killings are done by immigrants who are migrating from these nations. And that's why there's a whole lot of restriction and ban on immigration. So these are issues. But when you look at the things that are happening to us, when brothers are killing brothers and they are mutilating themselves in the form of a senseless warfare, it gives you an indication of immaturity, irresponsibility.
Okay.
So we must grow up.
Can we agree? Can we also agree that over 50% of the conflict in Africa is instigated from outside Africa?
I don't have a problem in agreeing.
Over 70% of the conflict in Africa is resource-based.
Yeah, but this is
over 90%, okay. Over 99% of the conflict in Africa is fought with weapons not made in Africa.
Yeah, and this is where
so who is selling? Who is profiting?
Leave who is profiting.
Good.
Is to say that
is Africa give you is Africa getting her weapons from Asia, not an opportunity?
It doesn't matter who you get the weapon from. You see, it is like somebody prescribing for you.
Okay.
A sniper to drink.
It depends if it's a cocktail.
And even in a cocktail, and they give you the sniper, and you are willing to swallow it. How will somebody come from another clime to tell you to kill your brother, and you are responsible? And then, of course, take the gun and start to kill your brother. This is the irresponsibility that I am talking about. And this is why, of course, they are not even allowing us to get access to this weapon. So even with China, there's agreement or trade on how these weapons should move and say, look, be careful, don't let it get out of this place. So all those international treaties are there because until they see us becoming responsible.
We are responsible. Very responsible. If possible, more responsible.
Then the crisis in Africa must cease.
The crisis in Africa, okay, that's a different kettle of fish. That's a
when we become responsible, the warfare in Africa will cease.
I'm talking about the people.
The killing in Africa will cease.
The people.
The brigandage.
As we
the pillaging
of the
right state will cease.
As we speak right now, there are crises all over, not just in Africa. But let's hold on to our discourse.
Yeah, but you see, why you are pointing to the crisis?
Okay.
All over. Take Europe, for example.
Do they have crisis?
They do have crisis.
Thank you.
But now, you look at the crisis in Europe. Is it clown against clown, state against state? No.
Okay. Over time, we are almost out of time, but over time, Europe have been able to purge themselves to the extent of having one state form of system.
Yeah.
Unlike African countries. African countries still have a whole lot of different nations bonded in one. So you are saying you are concurring that Africa need to grow up. So we still have some long period of time to grow. They did.
I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. We have to start to grow today.
Okay, we'll keep growing. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure having you on SOUQ Pulse.
My pleasure to be here.
For those that are wondering, next week we'll be looking at, okay, with this opportunity, with this expansion of China, we'll now be asking ourselves, what are the risks? What are the downside of it? That's what we're talking about next week. We spoke about the opportunities this week. So, hey, make sure you watch part 1 and look out for part 2. Thank you very much, Dr. Idahosa. It's always a pleasure having your SOUQ Pulse.
I am expecting a day that Africans and Nigerians will start to take this Chinese equipment and then, of course, start to do reverse engineering and study them very closely, and we start to build our prototype so that we can become the emerging economy globally.
To that, I say amen. To everyone that has been part of this particular program today, we say thank you very much for being there. Remember, don't stop talking and get busy. Get those hands dirty. There is no food for lazy man, mind you. We'll do this again tomorrow. My name is Chuks John-Rogers. Chuks, have yourself a very beautiful evening. Bye.